In 2011, there was a really bad flood in Brisbane, and this flood was catastrophic. The flood created enormous damage, over 200,000 people affected, 35 lives lost, and over $2 billion worth of damage. It was a disaster. What was really interesting about this flood, which was really, really bad, is that there was this group of people that started coming and helping other people. They were, in fact, helping people that they had no direct connection with. They just started arriving, helping people get their stuff out of their houses before they got flooded. And once they were flooded, helping them clean their houses out. These people started coming in droves. And in fact, more than 25,000 people showed up to help other people that had been affected. So many people came that it got called the Mud Army. It got called the Mud Army because people were covered in mud. There was mud everywhere. In fact, you see the photo there, that's the photo of my son, Jack, who as a 15-year-old came with me and we lined up for hours to be bussed here, even to the University of Queensland, the tennis courts over there, which got covered in mud. And for hours one afternoon, we helped to clear the mud off these courts. Now, if you can remember being 15, and if you know a 15-year-old boy, getting a 15-year-old boy to go outside and do something for someone else and still be smiling about it, that was a miracle. The other photo is a group of colleagues from where I was working here at the University of Queensland, who we went and helped another colleague who got affected by the flood. And what's interesting is that when we did our culture survey at the end of that year, that was the highlight for the staff in terms of a sense that we were working together. And I think this is a really interesting point, because there seems to be something quite satisfying about helping people that have got a problem that is not directly beneficial to us. You know, and whether this is from an evolutionary point of view or a spiritual point of view, I don't know. But there seems to be this benefit from helping people, helping solve problems that aren't when there's no benefit for you. You know, this is really important because the world we're in at the moment has some really big problems, some enormous challenges. You know, we've got to somehow try and find a way to feed an extra 2 billion people over the next 20 years. We've got climate rising at a rate that we can't control and can't even really predict accurately. We've got a chronic disease situation where the life expectancy in Western world is actually starting to decline for the first time. We've got these massive problems, inequality in areas, and we need some unique solutions. We need to find new ways of solving these problems. You know, Einstein said quite a while ago that you can't solve a problem with the same thinking you used to create it. Okay, you can't solve a problem using the same thinking you used to create that problem, which is a really important thing to dwell on. Because, you know, when we look at what's happened over the past, the tobacco industry has not come up with a cure for lung cancer. The flavored sugar industry, which is very big, has not come up with a cure for diabetes or obesity. The power generation industry is not trying to work out how we can save our polar ice caps. The reasons why we have social disadvantage and problems with refugees and problems with disadvantaged communities like our first Australians who have a much lower life expectancy than the rest of us, the things that cause those problems, we can't use that same way of thinking to solve those problems. We need new ways of thinking. You know, I've been fortunate, really fortunate to spend well over a decade working here at the University of Queensland, working with really smart people. You know, universities are amazing places because we've got the smartest people in our society all in the one place, all trying to try and work out how things work. Now, people like Professor Ian Fraser, who came up with this virus-like particle technology, which ended up in a cervical cancer vaccine, Gardasil, which is going to potentially save 250,000 lives a year. Now, that's a game-changing idea. Professor Besh Bandari, who actually formed a technology that enables us to encapsulate things like probiotics, which can keep probiotics alive in drinks and keep them alive and deliver a whole heap of different actives in food products. And we formed a startup company out of Professor Bandari's technology, which is a company that I am CEO of, and having a lot of fun trying to take this technology to the marketplace. And some researchers here that have worked out a way, how do we teach kids that have, or people that have intellectual disabilities with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities how to read? You know, and that program's called Latch On, and it's been licensed all around the world. So it's really helping young people who can't read learn how to read. This is game-changing ideas. The problem is that at a university like Queensland, we have 4,500 PhD students, thousands of researchers. And UQ is no different to every other university around the world. Lots of people coming up with solutions. But we have profoundly more people coming up with ideas and solutions than we have people actually trying to work out how do we take those ideas out. And the traditional method that we've done this is we've had great researchers like Yasmina Saltamboa, who's worked out the power in the Kakadu plum can actually be used as a preservative to extend the shelf life of a whole range of products and at the same time provide income capacity for Indigenous communities up in Northern Australia. I mean, amazing research, and the idea around universities is that researchers come up with how things work and why they work, and then we explain that to our students in rooms like this. And they sit there, but that model isn't working so well anymore. You can see our student in the second row there, not terribly engaged. Student at the front's very engaged, but not everyone's engaged. And so we've got to find, as university lecturers, we've got to find different ways to be able to get our students engaged in the sort of things we're doing. And that's when I came into academia about 3 years ago, where I'm an entrepreneur. I've started a few different companies, and I learned a lot about entrepreneurship. And I'm actually now in front of students, and I'm teaching them about entrepreneurship. And that's when I had this epiphany that we've got all these great ideas, all these great researchers coming up with these great ideas, but they're really good at research, and they don't actually want to go and leave the university and go and start a company and take that idea out. And there's really not anyone that's filling that role. And there's, in Australia, we have $10 billion a year coming from our universities in research. Around the OECD countries, $250 billion a year spent on research. That's a lot of money. That's profoundly more than what Apple spend. Okay, this is a lot of money we're spending, and it's almost like we're producing all these great ingredients, these amazing ingredients that could solve cancer and can solve disadvantage and can help kids learn how to read and maybe help us work out how to stop people getting addicted to drugs, maybe help us to end disadvantage in certain communities. But there's actually no one that's particularly able to or has the job of taking that out and translating that. You know, it's sort of like we've got this intellectual vault. Okay, all of these ideas, $250 billion a year worth of ideas. And look, the thing about the vault is that the door is open. Like, they're not actually necessarily locked away, but no one knows where they are, no one knows what's in there. There's this amazing vault. So how do we get these ideas out to be able to transform the world? And we desperately need to do this. That's when I met the next generation, Gen Z, millennials, whatever you call them. And look, can I tell you, the last 3 years I've been teaching these people, I am so impressed. You know, because here's a group of people who aren't necessarily just focused on having the biggest house, you know, having the fastest car, the trophy life. These people, when they're coming and they come into my workshops, they want to actually solve real problems. They've seen what a life looks like when you're just focused on being successful. And when they come to my workshops, they're interested in climate change, they're interested in food waste, they're interested in social issues with immigrants that come in and how do they actually solve these problems. This is a really exciting group. And so this idea that I had was, what if we took these game-changing ideas that come from all of these cleverest people that we have in the world, all in one place, and what if we partner them with these people who want to be game changers? Game-changing ideas with game changers. It's like we've got all these ideas, are like, you know, Cinderella, all dressed up, ready for the ball, but no pumpkin, no mice. Wouldn't it be cool if we could connect these two different ideas? Because students want to change the world, but they don't actually have the experience to have the ideas to change the world. And so let's put these two things together. That's where I think we can change the world. I think we can create game changers. You know, Tim Castell did a TED talk quite a while ago, and the talk was around that idea is not an innovation. An idea only becomes an innovation when you do two things. The first thing is you've got to be able to make it real. There's no point having a great idea that can solve the world's poverty, but it actually is impossible. You know, perpetual motion, great idea, can't make it real. The second part of that is really important. The second part is how do you unlock value with that idea? So it's great to invent, and researchers do a great job of making it real. That's what researchers do. We have ideas, and when we try and reduce it to practice and make it work. But who's actually going to work out how does that idea unlock value? Because that's actually really hard. Researchers get very upset when I say the making it real part's the easy part. The really hard part is working out how does that idea unlock value. Now, when you create an idea, when you have an idea and you make it real, you might come up with a really innovative solution. But if you can't work out how to unlock value from that solution, you end up with a Segway. Okay? Amazing idea. You know, these guys spent hundreds of millions of dollars creating this technology, and the technology was incredible. You know, nearly 20 years ago, it was amazing what they were able to do. And they thought, look, everyone's going to want one of these. You know, it was only a mere $5,000. Everyone's going to want to have one of these. Students are going to use them going to uni. The problem was you couldn't use them on the footpath because you'd knock other people over. You couldn't use them on the road because you get hit by a bus. They were too heavy to use in sand. And so ultimately, while it was a great idea, they didn't actually solve any problem until maybe 15 years later when security guards started using them in shopping centres. But no one was going to pay the same price as what was nearly 20 years ago, the price of a cheap car, for something that was actually just a cool to have, not a have to have. But when we get it right, when we can solve an unresolved problem using an amazing idea, using a different idea, a different way of solving that problem, we get something like Uber. Okay, and what I love about the Uber story is that here's someone who's had a look at this streetscape. Just imagine a streetscape in any city in the world, and there's this big line of people at 2 o'clock in the morning that have had a night out and they just want to go home. And they're on this taxi rank and there's an hour wait, and all of these cars are driving past with one person in them, driven by maybe students and people who have got one person in the car and they actually really don't have very much to do. And someone said, I wonder if those people with those cars driving past could take that person wanting to go home. And that's what Uber is. They combine this idea where you're quite comfortable with someone else taking you home with this idea that you could actually pay for that just using a pre-agreed amount on your phone, on your account. You don't need to actually have cash to do that. That was a game-changing idea, and putting those two things together has created the world's biggest personal transportation company that doesn't own a single car. That's what combining technology or innovation or ideas with unlocking does. So what is the unlock? And that's actually really hard to find out because there's no simple answer. So I guess what I'm talking about is an Uber for game changers. You know, how do we actually get these game-changing ideas with people who want to change the game? But unlike Uber, it's not a single point transaction. It's not, here's my cool idea, and oh, thanks for that, I'm just going to go and change the world. Okay, it's actually not that simple. If it was that simple, we would do it. Universities would do it. And they try and do it. We're doing as good a job as we can, but it takes a lot of resource. And I guess what I thought was, at a place like a university, we have 55,000 students at this campus. You know, around the world, we have millions of students who really what they want to do is they want to learn how to change the world. They want to do something that's actually going to have a legacy, and in reality, that's what researchers want to do as well. But they just don't have the time and the capacity, or necessarily the right skills to be able to do that unlocking. Because to do the unlocking, you've got to talk to lots of people. You've got to really understand the problem. Let me give you an example of where we've done this here at UQ. So cardiovascular disease is a big problem. You know, we as humans, it kills more of us than anything else. Okay, it's a big problem. So what's the solution? Well, Dr. Nima Guinness here at the University of Queensland has been working on lowering cholesterol using plant fibres. Really simple stuff around oat fibre, beta-glucan that lowers cholesterol. We had a project with Nima about 4 years ago where I had one of my students, Daniela, and she went out because Nima had actually developed a blueberry muffin. One of these blueberry muffins would lower your cholesterol. That sounds amazing. That's game-changing. And so we went and talked, and Daniela went and talked to people, and she went to cafes, and people thought this idea was okay. Then we went to one of the major supermarkets here, and they said, that sounds like a really interesting idea, but we don't actually do very well when we try and sell health muffins. We're actually launching a range of muffins that are full of chocolate bars. And I'm looking and I'm saying, you've got to be kidding me. Really? We've got this obesity issue, we've got cardiovascular disease, we've got the diabetes, and you're trying to sell people Mars bar muffins. I mean, that's just obscene. And so the project ended, and we couldn't do anything more. No, we couldn't find anyone to take that idea forward. That's when I discovered, and a course I ran just last semester, where I had a group of students looking at this same idea of how do we use oat fibre to lower cholesterol. And they went out and they talked to, in a group of 10 students, they talked to 750 consumers. They're trying to understand the problem, trying to work out where is the unlock, because the technology is really simple. And in this process, they were able to discover that the people who actually have the problem with cardiovascular disease actually don't care about it as much as the people who love them. Okay? And so what they discovered is the people who love, the partners of the people who have a problem, wanted to find ways to help their partner. And so they came up with this really simple idea of just putting oat fibre and beta-glucan in a little sachet so that you can pour it in your partner's muesli, breakfast cereal, drink. He doesn't even know what's happening, but he's getting his cholesterol lowered. Boom. That's an unlock. That's awesome. And so these guys, this photo is taken at the local farmers markets. They're out there selling these sachets of this product. You know, it's potentially changing the game, but not only just that, these guys have learned so much about complex problem solving, and that's what our next generation need to learn, is how do you solve complex problems? Because the world is full of problems, and success of our people is based on how well we solve problems. And we need to not just tell people about what are the ingredients of a cake. We need to show them how to bake a cake and how to bake that cake in a way so that it actually solves people's problems, not gives them cardiovascular disease. So we come up with this idea, I guess, where what I do in my classes is we start with a discovery. So we give students a discovery, a research discovery, and it's medical discovery or whatever it is, and then we tell them to go out and find a problem that this discovery solves. And that requires empathy. And you've heard a bit about empathy. Empathy is really important because empathy gets you to understand the person who you're trying to impact, understand their problem. And you can only do that by talking to them, engaging with them, listening to them. You know, I learnt my empathy skills off of my wife, who's very good at listening. Here's a little hint. If you find someone who's very good at listening, either employ them or marry them, one of the two. They are wonderful people to do life with. But once you've got a discovery, and then if you can combine that with empathy, then you get insight. And insight is what solves problems. And once you've got discovery, you've got empathy and insight, then you can come up with an innovation. And that's how you change the world. But the only way we can do that is through a partnership. Because the people who are great at discovery are probably not either great at the empathy or the insight, or just don't have time to do it. You know, Ian Fraser spent over 2 decades coming up with his forest-like particle technology. You know, Graham Clark, who came up with the cochlear implant, 2 decades. I mean, they had the ability to do their discovery, but not the actual translation. So this can lead you to a why. Okay, why is really important. And what Simon Sinek says in his book, Start With Why, that if you have clarity of why, that gives you the discipline of how and the consistency of what. And most of us think about the how and the what. We know what we do, we know how we do it, but do we know why we do it? That's fundamentally a more important question. But even, and if I add just one thing to Simon Sinek's sort of golden circle, which is who. Who. You know, and a why without a who means that it's probably about you. And that will not do. Bit of Dr. Seuss there. A why without a who means it's probably about you. And can I tell you that that is very unsatisfying. A life that's about you is incredibly unsatisfying. But a life about a who that's someone else, and you're actually solving their problem, that is a great life to live. And that can be discovered in this space in between problem and solution. So any game is fair game. We can change any game. Whether it's health, medical, whether it's social science, whether it's disadvantage. I've got students working on a Hollywood project. I've got a group of students working with the Queensland Brain Institute who have discovered that you can improve cognitive impairment in older people just by certain exercise regimes. So I've got a group of my students trying to do that, working out what's the unlock. Is it an app? Is it a personal training system? Is it a gym, a new gym? Is it a relationship with a retirement home? I don't know. They don't know. So what we need is an army of game changers. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is actually combining great ideas with people who want to take those great ideas and change the world. So let me leave you with one question. What is your why? And who is your who? Thank you.